We are more than enough. Father God, make provisions, Lord, where we're deficient and show us your reflection of us, that we are fearfully, wonderfully made by you. Father, when you come through for us with answered prayers and wisdom, whatever we ask, Father, let us not forget. I reject the spirit of forgetfulness, Father God, because you have been too good in every season, Lord. Let us count it all as joy, Father God, and let our joy not be depleted. I pray this over each and every woman here and all over the world. In Jesus' name, amen.
Widow at Zarepheth. This is a woman whose story is so easy to relate to because it is really easy to get into the space of feeling not only invisible, but like you are defined by your circumstances. And that is this woman's story. So I'm going to share now. So the widow at Zarephath, you can find her passage in 1 Kings 17. And essentially, her story is that Elijah, who is a prophet, has come into contact with people who did not recognize the God that he served. And because of that, there is a drought in the land. And Elijah ends up leaving, and he goes into the wilderness, and the Lord supplies for him in the wilderness and then tells him, I want you to go to this woman in the town of Zarephath, and I've already instructed this widow to provide for you. So he goes and he meets the woman. The woman is out gathering sticks. He talks to her and he says, hey, can you please bring me a little water in a jar so that I can have a drink? And then he also adds, and then can you also bring me a piece of bread? Then the widow says, as surely as the Lord your God lives, I don't have any bread. I only have a handful. It's enough flour in this jar just for me and enough olive oil in this jar just for me and my son. So my plan was to gather a few sticks, take them home, make bread for us, and then we're going to eat this bread and we're going to die. And so Elijah says to her, look, the Lord told me to ask you, don't be afraid. Go home and do what I ask you to do. Make some for me first, and then some for you and your son. And what you have is not going to run out. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day that the Lord sends rain back on the land. So this woman is like, okay. She goes and she does exactly what Elijah asks. And there was food enough for them to eat every single day. And so then Elijah asks and decides to stay with her and her family. So a little bit of time goes by, and then the woman's son becomes sick. And when her son is sick, she goes to him and she says to Elijah, what do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son? And I'm sure that probably made Elijah feel some kind of way, because he was like, wait a minute. Wait, you invited me into your home. You saw the goodness of the Lord. Like, why would I be coming to bring destruction to you? So I'm sure he felt like this is weird. So he went to the Lord, asked where her son was staying, went up there to her son, stretched out over his body, prayed, and essentially interceded on his behalf for the Lord to return his life to him. And he cried out to the Lord, like, Lord, why did you bring tragedy on the place where I'm staying? You know that they're associating me with you, and now you look like a God of tragedy and destruction instead of a God who is good and faithful. So the Lord responds to Elijah. He's compassionate towards him and allows the boy's life to come back to him. So Elijah picks him up, carries him to his mom, and she says, now I know that you are a man of God and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth. That is the story of this woman. So as we look at her life, as we stop and take a moment and see ourselves reflected in her story, we are looking at how do we learn through personal struggle, whether it's the challenges of parenting or the spiritual journey to recognize how our story impacts our legacy, who we are and how we show up, what we would believe about ourselves. How does it help us to recognize? How does it help us to recenter ourselves? How does it help us to reconcile what we believe about ourselves based on our circumstances? Because it is really easy to start to feel like your circumstances are you, like you are your situation. And so when things go bad, that's something about me. I must be doing something bad. When things are good, okay, things are good. And some of us even have a hard time just accepting when things are good, when things are peaceful, when things are what we desire for them to be. And we're just looking around and waiting for the next bad thing to happen, because we get so used to being defined by our circumstances. We get so accustomed to feeling like we have to exist in a state of chaos or in a state of desperation or despair. And that's where we find this woman. She had resolved in her mind that her and her son had to die. We're just going to eat this bread and we're going to die. There's nothing else for us. There's no other good that's coming. There's no other direction that we can move. It's just death. It's just destruction. I just have to exist in this state of desperation. And it's really easy to get there. So when we think about the widow at Zarepheth's personal struggle, the first thing that we see is, how do we recognize? How do we learn to see ourselves as sufficient? Recognizing that you have what you need in this situation, even if your situation seems scarce, if it seems impossible, if it seems like something might be missing at the moment, like the good that you were made for. You were made to encounter good every single day. And even if your right now isn't exactly what you want it to be, there is good that you were made for. There is goodness that exists in this very day for you to have and hold. So how do we learn to see ourselves as sufficient? Are you struggling to see yourself as sufficient? Are there areas where you're forgetting, like, no, I already have everything I need. I have everything I need to meet myself in this season. I'm not lacking anything. I'm not missing anything. Everything that I need exists where I am right now. And that means sometimes we have to stop looking outside of ourselves and start looking inside of ourselves. We have to start looking at who we are. What are we capable of doing? What are the gifts and the skills and the abilities that we have to meet ourselves where we are? I sometimes talk to my kids about looking outside of your borders. When you look outside of your borders, it's really easy to get into the spirit of comparison, where you see what somebody else has, or how far they've gotten, or how far they've come, or what they're doing right now. And you're like, oh, I don't have that. I don't know how to do that. I wish I could. And that spirit, the spirit of comparison, looking outside of your own borders, will always keep you feeling insufficient. It will make you feel like you do not have enough. You don't have enough ability. You don't have enough understanding. You don't have enough skill. You don't have enough support. You don't have enough energy. You don't have enough time. It makes us feel insufficient. But when we look inside of our own borders, you get to see, okay, I get to prioritize. I get to decide how I use my time. I get to decide what gets my energy. I have the ability to recognize how my gifts get to show up in the spaces where I am. Even if it's not perfect, I still have the power to do this. So even if everything else around her was despair, she got to decide how she showed up for her son, because she was building a legacy. So if she felt a sense of despair, her son would then interpret that as, oh, we're about to die. Oh, this is a dire situation. Destruction must be what's coming for us. And that's part of legacy building. When we're legacy building, are we doing the things? Are we showing up in the ways that say, I'm sufficient. I have everything I need for this season. And then we talk about being overwhelmed by our circumstances. Recognizing when you feel overwhelmed, are so engrossed in the situation, like you almost have blinders on because you're that in the situation that you can't see what's happening around you. You don't really get to step back and be objective and say, I'm not a victim here. I have the ability to decide what works for me. I have the ability to move in a direction that aligns with my goals. And sometimes when we're so engrossed in the situation, it removes us from being able to see ourselves. We don't see that we have been supplied for. We don't see that we're sufficient in our own story. We believe that the lack around us is reflective of us. I'm missing something. I'm lacking something. That's why this is happening. And sometimes it's not that you're lacking anything, because you have everything you need. You're sufficient. Do you need to reprioritize? Do you need to restructure? Do you need to refocus? Do you need to recenter? It could be that simple. But when we take time to recognize ourselves and not assign our situation to our value, then you have an opportunity to really step back and see yourself and see that you are sufficient. You are enough. Who you are is necessary, it is essential, and it is purpose. And even more than that, it is powerful because you are sufficient. And sometimes we fail to recognize where we're holding on to guilt or shame because of our past. There's a verse where the widow of Zarephath asks Elijah, did you come to remind me of my past sin? Is your presence here supposed to make me feel shameful and guilty? I'm already holding on to the shame and guilt. I already decided for myself that me and my son had to die. And your presence just further makes me feel guilty. It makes me feel shameful that this is my situation. I'm not married. I'm a single mom. I'm a divorcee. I have all of these kids. Are you holding on to shame because of the past? Because of a situation that didn't go the way you wanted it to? Or because where you are right now isn't exactly where you saw yourself? It is really easy to assign shame and blame when our situation feels like it's about our value. But it's not. Your situation is merely a moment. It is a part of your path. And you don't know if that part of your path is meant to connect you with somebody else who's going through the same thing at a later time, or if it's meant to help you see yourself differently, to step back and say, oh no, I can do this. I am powerful enough to realize this. I do possess this ability. Or if it's meant to bring you closer to an encounter with the Most High. Is this part of your path meant to help you see who the Lord is, so that you recognize how much He loves you, or how much He desires to be in fellowship and in communication with you? Because when we hold on to the emotional bondage and the baggage, and we interpret that everything happening around us is about us, it's a punishment, that's how we end up removed from the truest parts of who we are. That's how we end up losing sight of our power and our purpose. That's how it becomes so easy to feel like a failure, because now I have assigned everything happening around me to me. You deserve better than that. We each deserve better than that. So as we stop and recognize, we can see the story of the woman at the widow at Zarepheth. But then we also see her parenting struggle. And her parenting struggle left her feeling like she was not centered in her story. Like she was the victim of circumstance. Everything around her was outside of her control. There's a drought. We don't have enough food and water. I'm a widow. I don't have the ability to do more. She did not feel centered in her story. And it is a human condition to feel like you're not central in your story, especially as a mom. Especially as a mom, when you have people dependent on you, when things have to happen and they require your involvement, it is really easy to get to that space of feeling like I am not the central character in this story. Everybody else is more important. Everybody else needs more attention. Everybody else needs more of my time. And then you're left with almost nothing. You leave yourself feeling like you're lacking something, like you're missing something. And oftentimes we are missing ourselves. We're missing the opportunity to check in with ourselves and say, this situation is not going in alignment with what I want for myself. I need to step back and reprioritize. Or this situation isn't giving me the opportunity to show up as my best self. I'm not honoring my boundaries. I need to communicate more clearly. Or it's even, you know what? I thought this was what I wanted, but I changed my mind. So I'm going to go in a different direction. Sometimes even as moms, we feel like we're not allowed to pivot. We're not allowed to change our minds. We're not allowed to move in a different direction. We're not allowed to say this doesn't work anymore and then to redefine it, reshape it. But you are. We each are. We are each allowed to say when it doesn't work anymore. And then to find the tools that help us to redefine and to align ourselves with our vision. We are allowed to say, okay, you know what? This seems to be an area where we all need to grow a little bit more, where we need a little bit more intention and time. And then stop and say, this is how we're going to move. This needs to go away. This needs to be added to. And then feel the sense of peace in doing that, not holding on to the emotional baggage or bondage and saying, yes, I'm allowed to do this. I'm allowed to say this. This is acceptable for me because I also have to meet my needs. If the widow at Zarephath wasn't so focused on the little bit that she had and just being a mom with a little bit, would the situation with Elijah have gone differently? Would he have had to tell her not to be afraid? Would he have had to remind her that he wasn't there to make her feel guilty or shameful? What are we holding on to as moms that cause us to feel like we are not central in our own story? Like everything else is more important than meeting your needs and showing up for yourself and honoring your boundaries and saying what needs to be said. It is important that we give ourselves permission to make the changes and say the words and do the things that help us to feel central in our story. Because when you stop feeling centered in your story, you end up choosing to parent from a place of expectation and assigning who you are as a mom to what your kids choose to do or how your family is perceived. If my kids do this, then what does it say about me as a mom? If my kids behave this way, what are people going to think about me as a mom or as a woman? when you're not central in your story, it's really easy to think that other people's stuff is about you because you're giving so much of yourself that you're not really left with anything. And so if you're not left with anything, then it's easy to say, yeah, what they just did, that was a reflection of me. So now if my kids are not behaving in alignment with how I've given to them and nurtured them, of course I'm going to take it personally, even though it's not about you. It could be about their developmental milestones. It could be about experiences that have happened to them that you're not even aware of. It could be about them trying to reconcile for themselves who they are in context of family, in the context of school. Like, we are all multifaceted. And because we are all multifaceted, there are so many layers that motivate how we think and act. And if we just focus on one part of that, we lose sight of being central in our story. And even being able to surrender our children to be themselves, surrendering them back to the Lord and saying, you gave me this child, you made me their mother. So give me the ability to see them and to encourage them, to help facilitate their own good so that they have an opportunity to be their best selves too, in the same way that I am. In the same way that I want to help manage my own needs, help me manage their needs, but not lose sight of myself. Because it is important that we maintain the ability to be responsive to our own physical and mental needs and challenges. And if you're depleted because you're trying to give to everybody else and leaving nothing for yourself, you can't do that. If you're so focused on trying to be for everyone and be nothing to you, how are you showing up for yourself? How do you get to be central in your story? And not being central in your story affects our spirit. It affects our ability to walk our own journey and be in tune with what we need spiritually. So the very things that we often feel ashamed of become the platform that the Lord uses to connect us with the right people at the right times and in the right way. Have you ever met somebody and y'all share something in common and you're like, oh man, that's so crazy. I thought I was the only one who did that, or I thought I was the only one who experienced that. It is because the very place that you are right now, stop and think about that for just a second. Like, whether you're a mom who is working her very best mommery, or if you are struggling in the totality of motherhood, where you are right now matters. And it is going to be the very place that the Lord uses to connect you with somebody else who either needs to be edified and reminded that you can do this. Don't give up. I know it's hard right now, but there is another side of this. You do make it to the other side. Or if that person is coming to tell you, hey, I've been there. I know exactly how that feels, and I don't want you to take it personally. I don't want you to lose heart. I don't want you to be discouraged. Let me share how my situation turned out. Where you are right now matters. And it matters because we were not meant to live life alone. We were made to fellowship and to be connected with people who can support and see us. People who not only see us, but see the best parts of us and want to see us win and encourage us along the way. I believe that was why the Lord sent Elijah to this specific woman. It wasn't a one-person town or a two-person town. It was an entire city. And out of everybody in that city, where she was mattered, and the Lord wanted her to see herself. He wanted somebody who would see her and edify her and encourage her, one, not to be afraid. You are not your circumstances. You are sufficient. You have everything you need, and you possess the skills and the ability to meet yourself where you are. Don't think that I'm trying to remind you of your past or hold you hostage in a moment to make you shameful or feel guilty. You are an overcomer. You could have died the first day you were a widow. You could have quit mothering the first day you had to do this by yourself, but you overcame. And where you are right now is a direct reflection of the strength and the resilience and the ability to succeed and prosper in all that you have been made to be. We are made to be connected, and where we are right now matters. So we have a choice. To be reconciled to ourselves means that we have to choose not to forget the goodness that we receive every single day. There are moments of goodness if we choose to see them every day, no matter how difficult the day is. The fact that you get to hug your child, the fact that you get to pick up a phone and either text or converse with somebody who cares about you, the fact that the Lord chose today to send this message to you for you to join this group and be encouraged and inspired, there is goodness in each day for us. But it's a matter of choosing to see it. It's a matter of having that perspective that says, no, I'm central in my story. So I'm not going to miss the moments of goodness that I am being given the chance to have. No matter how challenging my child's behavior, the fact that I get to hug them and communicate with them, the fact that I have been entrusted in this way to shape this life and to build my legacy by how I show up here, that's goodness. That is a gift. Especially when you think about how many women in the world have to have fertility treatments, or don't have the option to birth a baby, or don't ever get to hold a part of themselves outside of themselves. It is a gift that we even get to do this. And being reconciled to ourselves means recognizing that it's a gift and then staying central in our story so that we don't miss those moments. And then the part that I like about this story is that this woman, the widow at Zarepheth, this mom, went from the Lord existing outside of her. She said, as surely as the Lord your God, when she first met Elijah, the Lord your God lives, I'm going to eat this bread and then I'm going to die. Me and my baby. We're about to be out. And then by the end of the story, when she gets to receive her baby and recognize the gift of being his mom, regardless of how difficult the circumstances, to own her story and to see herself reflected in the goodness of the Lord showing up for her. Because maybe that child would have died whether Elijah was there or not. And Elijah being there is what saved him. Elijah being there is what allowed her to remain in connection to her only baby. She owned the Lord for herself. She said, now I know that you are a man of God and that what you say is true. So if you say the Lord is here for me, if you say I am a woman of value and of worth, and I get to see my circumstances, I get to recognize and be central in my story, now I know that the Lord is here. And he's here for me. He went from being Elijah's God to being her God, to her having that personal encounter and experience. And that is what allows her to walk her path. It's what allows her to walk her path with power. It's what allows her to walk her path with purpose. And to know that the Lord never wants to shame you. He never wants you to feel burdened by your past. As a matter of fact, he says, come to me if you are burdened. Come to me if your past is weighing on you. Come to me if you are hurting. And I want to give you rest. I want you to have rest, because when you're rested, you're not weary. You can't see yourself when you're weary. When you're weary, everything is too much. Everything is a I can't even, I don't want to, I won't, I shan't, I'm done, I'm out, I don't want this. When you're weary, everything seems like too much. But when you're rested, you have that sense of being refreshed and whole that says, I'm capable. I have the capacity to do this. This moment is not beyond me. This situation is not beyond me. And I will not define myself to this momentary situation, because every moment, every situation is momentary. We are being renewed and living day by day. So every day is different. Every day is new. Every day is a moment to see the goodness if you stay central in your story. But when we're not centered in our stories, we get weary because we're trying to be everything to everybody instead of acknowledging our limits, instead of honoring our boundaries, instead of communicating with people for clarity and saying, I will not do that. That does not align with where I'm trying to go or what I want to do. Or reprioritizing and then being willing to tell somebody, I know that that seems emergent to you, but it's not a priority right now. It would be really great if we could. And then say what you need to focus on. Or say, I acknowledge your priorities and I respect them, but I'm going to move in a different direction. And then move in that direction because you're allowed to do that. Elijah did it without words. He said, don't be afraid. Listen to me. I see your boundary. You're saying you want to die. You're saying you have very little, that you don't have the capacity. I acknowledge that boundary that you're saying exists for you. But respectfully, I would like to move in a different direction that aligns more with the reason why I'm here, with the reason why I came. You're allowed to do that. Other people's energy doesn't have to be your reality. You don't have to live in a state of desperation or chaos. That's not why you were made. And as we reflect on this woman's story, we have a chance to really check in with ourselves and to recognize, how do we have the opportunity to cultivate a mindset of sufficiency and gratitude in our daily lives, despite the challenges around us? Are there ways that you have allowed your past to define you? And is that showing up in your parenting right now? And if so, how can you shift your perspective to see your past as an opportunity that allows you to grow from that place, and then to show up in your present different? And as a parent, as a mom, how do you get to balance your desire to meet your children's needs with the necessity to surrender what is not for you to the Most High? You cannot be everything to your child. You're not supposed to be. Because if you're everything to them, when do they go to the Lord? When do they learn for themselves? When do they build resilience? And how can you choose not to parent from a place of guilt or shame? What expectations do you need to let go of to free yourself so that you have peace and so that you are centered in your story and reconciled to the version of you that is supposed to exist in the fullest capacity of your best self? And so then we get to talk about our mom life, because our mom life means we're measuring our moments, we're owning our story, and we're meeting our needs. And the widow at Zarepheth did that. She was centered in her story. She spoke and communicated her boundaries. Did they need some refining and reshaping? Absolutely. Because she had to move from a place of assigning her value to herself based on her circumstances, and instead seeing who she was made to be, seeing the value of her life and her role and her sufficiency, and moving in that direction. This is important. You don't have to deny or diminish yourself in order to substantiate your existence. You don't have to assign your value based on where you are right now or what you're going through. This is a moment. This is a part of your path. It is not the final destination. And you were made for goodness. And this is a part of the beautiful story of your life that you are sowing into right now. Even just by being here, it gives you a chance to lay aside the thinking that your situation is beyond you, or you're incapable of living in it or moving beyond it. I want to encourage you to know and to be mindful daily that you have everything you need for where you are right now. You are sufficient. And then we have a few life applications. If y'all want to take a screenshot of this one, I'll let you go through this one by yourselves. This is just some practical ways that you can live in this knowledge by embracing yourself, giving yourself permission, and seeing that you are sufficient.
I just want to say, guys, if the font is small, you can zoom in where the presentation is happening to be able to see it larger.
And then we have our affirmation. If you need me to go back to a slide, let me know and I can go back. I am enough. I am fully equipped to navigate my circumstances. I am not defined by my past, but shaped by my experiences. As a parent, I surrender my fears and expectations, trusting that my needs and those of my children will be met. I am not bound by guilt or shame. My spiritual journey is a testament to the divine grace and sufficiency I receive daily. I forgive my past self, acknowledging my growth and embracing gratitude. I choose hope over despair, recognizing my ability to rise above challenges. If you'd like to screenshot that one, feel free. There we go. Come on, technology. There we go. Is there anybody that would like to share something that resonated with them, something that they hadn't thought of before that they can see through the life of the widow of Zarepheth, something that maybe you're realizing that you need to practice or carry with you moving forward? This is your chance to share. Feel free.